Hi, this is Miss Litton. This is a Tuesday afternoon with some lovely honors biologists in the room. Say hello. Hello. All right, so this is a review of Chapter 32, Behavior. If I was going to break, If I was going to break this down to big ticket items about behavior. Here we go. Behavior. Okay. One of the big ticket items I would do would be the whole nature versus nurture, right? That's a whole big ticket item because you can talk about how it's genetic versus your environment, right? And we talked a lot about that, and I'll review that. We did nature versus nurture. The second big topic that we did was not behavioral ecology, right? Okay, and we looked at things like mating, right? And female choice under that one, and several other things. I'm just trying to get you to get the big tick items here. And then the next thing we talked about was sociobiology, and we talked about the plus and the minus of living together. We talked about the concept of altruism and does it exist. And then a fourth thing which you need to remember to do are your additional objectives. Okay? Does that seem like the big ticket overview? Yeah. Okay? So then what we need to have is when we need to look at like what was some evidence we had that your behavior was genetic. What was some evidence we had that your behavior was genetic? What did we look at? Did we look at birds? Do you remember the lovebirds and the way they got their nesting material? If you remember that, some cut it in really long strips and some cut it in short strips, and they wondered, is that how they were raised, or was that in their DNA? And what they found was that if they bred those two lovebirds, that they got an intermediate response. They didn't cut long and they didn't cut short. They cut intermediate length, and they did try to tuck it in the tail feathers. We also looked at some other evidence with snakes. Do you remember? And their affinity for slugs, and whether they could taste the slugs. And what did it boil down to? Yeah, number of tongue flicks that they had. And so that was something physiological that was in their DNA that determined their tongue flicks. So food preference, something that looks like it would be a choice, like do you like apple pie or don't you like apple pie, was really in their DNA. What else did we look at? We looked at aplysia. Do you remember that it would lay those millions of eggs, right? We looked at mice and the phosphe gene, that whether they would mother or not, if they were good mothers or not. And we looked at twin studies, right? All of those gave us pieces of evidence that our behavior could be in our DNA. So if I ask you a question about that, whether it's an essay question or a short answer question, I want you to be able to come up with pieces of evidence to support that your behavior is genetic. Okay? But we also saw evidence that your behavior could be due to your environment as well. And I'm going to bring up pictures of that so you can see it. So I'm going to just remind you first about the genetic behavior. Those were the lovebirds. We looked at mice. We looked at the twin studies, the aplysia, and the phos gene. All of those were pieces of evidence that it is in your DNA. When we looked at environmental conditions for our behavior, one of the things that we talked about are things like fixed action patterns. So this could be something that is in our DNA. It's like determined. Like this is I know how to build a nest. And it doesn't improve with any learning. It's set. It's the only way you can do it. And we looked at different nest building like this, a series of behaviors where it was triggered, and they had to build the circle, and then they had to build the tube, and so forth. But there are other behaviors that were brought about that were different and could be altered over time, and that is called learning. And one of the things we talked about of learning is a lion knows when it can attack and win and when it can't, right? Whether it's in a zoo or in the open, it knows it's worth attacking, and that's called habituation. This deer knows that when to be afraid if it's not hunting season or if it is hunting season. So that's saying its behavior was determined by its environment. It knows when to be afraid. One key thing we talked about was imprinting. And imprinting is that there is a special time, a sensitive period, when certain organisms can learn something. I didn't give this analogy in class, but it is another good one. They took birds and they separated the view that the baby bird and the mom bird had. It was just separated. And so the baby bird saw one thing and the mother bird saw another thing. They showed a predator of that particular species of bird to the mom, who she immediately started screeching. Now, what was in the DNA of the baby bird is the DNA of the baby bird told it that's something I need to be afraid of. But the thing that the baby bird, the view that the baby bird got was a bottle of bleach. And so he learned to be afraid of the bottle of bleach. He knew to be afraid of it because his mom was making the warning call, and he assumed what his mom saw, he saw. So every time a bottle of bleach would be brought out, he would have defensive mechanisms as if it would be a predator. And when a predator came out, he didn't care at all, right? Because he learned what to be afraid of because the mother taught him. Birds will do it as well, as they'll pick up food, make the food call. That's in the DNA, knowing that that is the food call. But they're teaching them by picking up and dropping what the food is. That's the learning. So that's when you're combining those two things together. We talked about Lorenz and the goslings, that they knew whatever waggles over me, that's in the DNA. Hey, whatever waggles over me is my parent. But they learned who that parent was with whoever did the waggling. In this case, it was Lorenz. So then they followed Lorenz wherever he went. Birds and songs get imprinted upon them. They get taught the songs. And we learned that through different experiments that social interactions were really critical to them. Okay. Another whole segment under learning, imprinting was about olfactory imprinting, which has to do with what? Smell. And what did we learn about salmon?
They can
smell their way back home. So if we change the chemicals in the water, then can they smell their way back home? Absolutely not. Okay, so let's just go back up here just for a minute and go back to this. Let me pull it down here. Minute. Come down here. Whoa. Okay, come down here. Okay, whoa. Okay, whoa. Put it right there. Okay, so let's just add to this very messy page. What were some examples of things in our environment that we looked at? Habituation. What else did we look at? Imprinting. And we had several examples of imprinting, right? We saw some with birds and with fish, right? Okay, good. Just want to make sure we're at that. Next, we talked about associative learning. So that would be another one we could add to our list, is associative learning. And we learned that you're associating two things together. And we looked at one example, which is classical conditioning. And wait, let me make sure I'm still recording. Okay, I would like to continue. Thank you very much. So we talked about associative learning, and one of those was classical conditioning. And this is where the stimulus becomes before. And in this case with Pavlov's dogs, the stimulus was food, right? Initially food. That's an unconditioned stimulus. And so that food would be placed before the dog, and the dog would start salivating because he's hungry. That's a normal physiological response to food. But what they started doing ahead of time was doing what?
Ringing the bell.
Ringing the bells. So that would be the conditioned stimulus. So the bell ringing happened before the food got brought out, so they would start salivating right as soon as they heard the bell. That is classical conditioning. A physiological, you're getting a physiological reaction to occur. It would be the same thing if wherever you keep your leash for your dog, as soon as you go towards that area, your dog gets all excited because they know, I bet a leash is going to come out and that leash is going to go on me and then we're going for a walk. Okay? That would be classical conditioning. But if I say to my dog before I put the leash on him, sit, Frodo, sit. And then he sat and I patted his head and said, good job, good job. Is that classical conditioning? No, what is that? Operant conditioning. He performed the right operation and now I'm going to put his leash on and then go out there for that walk. And for that, it was not Pavlov. Who was the scientist who did that one? Skinner. And remember, he had reinforcers like good dog, and punishers like a shock. So that would be like if you said a naughty word and your mom washed your mouth out with soap, right? Can't use liquid soap because that's too easily rinsed out. You actually have to make them bite down on a bar of soap so it gets stuck in their teeth. Yeah, that's what I did. My kids still talk about it. Yeah, don't do that. So, but that was what I was hoping is they would think about talking naughty and remember what? The soap. So that was a punisher, right? That would be associated with talking naughty. All right? So let's go back to our little summary paper that I put somewhere here. So we have habituation, we have imprinting. So then we could talk about associative learning. And the two underneath associative was classical conditioning and then what?
Operating conditioning.
Okay, good job. So messy, it's hard to look at. All right. We talked about some other examples as well. We talked about, and you could just add that to the list, observation, imitation. Maybe you watched somebody braid hair, so now you braid hair like that. That would be observation or imitation. In this case, baby watches mom how to wash sweet potatoes before you eat them, so they do that as well. Okay, insight. Insight is when you have an aha moment. This is some skill set or something you've never been able to do, a behavior you never had before, a behavior that was never shown to you before. And you kind of put together, in this case, an example of insight was this raven learning how to access food he would try to fly by and he couldn't get it. But if he reached down with his beak and pulled part of the string up and stepped on it and held it there, it would then be able to reach a little bit farther and hold that and reach a little bit farther and hold that. And so that would be an example of insight. Okay? So you can add that to the list as well, right? Imitation, observation, and then insight. Right? And I can ask you all the quiz questions, but I'll just do them at the end. Okay? Big topic number 2 was behavioral ecology. So looking at what shapes the behavior, and we know when they're in their environment, it must be something that made them more likely to survive. What do you call that? Starts with an A. An adaptation, right? So that behavior must get reinforced and selected for. So one of those we looked at is why do females choose who they choose? So there were 2 genes on that, okay, on why females choose. One was the good gene hypothesis, that it's bigger, it's stronger, it has the best territory, so that's why I'm going to choose that particular mate. Or maybe it's just really what? Pretty, yeah. And that would be the runaway hypothesis. Why females choose who they choose. And we looked at sexual selection, and there's intersexual and intrasexual. intersexual are why the reasons. This would be relating to either the good gene hypothesis or the runaway hypothesis as to why she picks Joe or Jim. Okay? Did she pick because Joe over Jim because he had good genes, or did she pick Joe over Jim because he was better looking? That would be the runaway hypothesis. Joe and Jim competing with each other for Betty's affections, that would be intrasexual selection. And these differences lead to what's called dimorphism, where the males and the females look very different from each other. Do you remember when we watched this video, this one in the top right-hand corner? So those birds had some really complicated noises and dances and scenarios, and they're competing with other male birds who have those same scenarios. So the male birds competing with other male birds, what kind of selection is that? Intersexual selection, right? Intrasexual selection, is that what you said? Intra? Yeah. Intra is within, yeah, so within that male population. Who she eventually chooses and why, because remember she either rejected him or accepted him, that's intersexual selection. The female and the male selection choices. So males fighting each other, intrasexual, okay? Females choosing one male over another, and so that's why they have all these dances and things. That's intersexual selection. Okay, so that was topic 2. Let's see if I had a little more on that. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, when males compete for an area, what is that usually called? It's usually males, not females, but it can be females. A territory. Yeah, it's competition, but it's for a territory. Yeah. And to hold that territory, they can make howls, they can release smells or pheromones or urinate or just fight. There's a price that comes with all of that, though. If you are the alpha male, you have to consume a lot of food, and you might get hurt because you're usually the one doing the fighting for the group. Good. Okay, then the last topic in chapter 32 was sociobiology. So it was trying to understand why organisms live together. And we said you have to look at the good of living together versus the bad. So you need to look at the benefits versus the what? The costs. Yeah, disadvantages. So we said benefits are things like you can share the load. Other people can have certain jobs within your population. More eyes to defend yourself, more lookouts, more babysitters, more to forage food, more to dig the tunnel. So you work collectively. And that would be the benefit. The disadvantages of living in a population is you can have disagreements about who gets to do what and who receives what. Who gets to have sex, who doesn't get to have sex. Who gets first choice at the food, second choice of the food, third choice. You have fewer overall young, because you usually have fewer breeding pairs in that group. You have some that breed and some that don't. And lastly, parasite spread. But for those that live together, that must be the benefits here must outweigh the costs. All right? And then we looked at some of the jobs you get when you're in a population. You might have to stand guard. What would motivate someone to stand guard? Yes?
So to keep their genes alive.
Keep their genes alive. Either it's their offspring, well done. Either it's their offspring, direct selection that they're looking out for, or for their what?
Their kin.
Yeah, their kin. Kin selection, their relatives that they're looking out for. So this idea of self-sacrifice, standing on that hill and screaming, or certain members of the ant colony doing the fighting to the death, why would they do that? Is it because they were kind, they were altruistic, they sacrificed their own fitness? Remember, fitness is your ability to pass on your what? Genes. Did they do it because they said, look, I'll kill my line off in order to preserve your line? No. What are they really doing it for? To preserve theirs, right? Then there's a name which isn't really quite true, but it is called reciprocal altruism, which is I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back, right? So it's I'm giving up my fitness momentarily. Maybe I am a vampire bat. Maybe I just got a blood meal, okay, and it's yummy, but I'm going to give up some of that nutrition I need for myself, and I'm paying it forward because I know the next time I need a meal, I can get it from them. Okay, so that's called reciprocal altruism. Okay, and again, if you're going to live in a population, you have to be able to communicate with each other. So let's see if we can just remember what were the different types of communication that were out there. Okay, give me one.
Chemical.
Chemical. Good.
Visual.
What's something?
Auditory.
Okay, visual. Auditory. What was the last one?
One starts with T.
Tactile, yes. Tactile. All right. So now let's see if we can remember examples for each of those. What was one for chemical? P. Okay, urine. So you mark your area. A pheromone. That's something that a female might secrete saying, I am ready to have sex. Okay? Visual. What's something that's visual?
A dance.
A dance. A dance can be visual, like a bird dancing, like a mating dance. What else could be visual? I could show you my teeth. Yeah. So there could be demonstrations of some sort, right? Okay, give me an auditory one.
Whales have songs.
Songs. I love it. Whales. Growls. Growls. People talking. Right? Those are all things. Right? And then tactile means what?
Touching.
Touch. So it could be like monkeys touching one another. What was another one? That sounded bad.
The bee dance.
Bee dance. I'm really glad I recorded that thought. On bee dance, bees can communicate two things. What two things can they communicate? Direction and distance. How does direction get communicated? The line of their dance, that center line, right? So if they are dancing like this, right? Then that means when you go outside, wherever the sun is, if the sun is here, right? You want to fly at this angle, and that's where you will get the food. That's a weird sun, okay? Sorry. Okay. It's not really that much better, but thank you for accepting that. All right. Now, how do they do distance?
The number of waggles.
Number of waggles. And the waggles is what's going on right there. The shimmy, shimmy, cocoa puff. And okay? And that is species specific. All right. Okay, you got all that? You want to try to do all the questions that are in here? In fact, let's start with the last one because I don't think any classes got to do that last one. So let's go in today as our favorite, and I want to use it tomorrow too because I like it, favorite cereal.
Ooh, I had
Favorite cereal. Oh, here's the bee dance. Walk out that door though. Turn around now. I'm going to pause you just to uno momento while they log in. All right, so try to do these questions at home. I'm going to show them to you. Maybe write it down on a piece of paper so you commit to your answer. We're really sad you couldn't be with us here today for our review. That is question 1. Remember, we're not doing it out loud. Here's question 2. Here's question 3. Remember, commit your answer to paper. You can do it. We believe in you. Hashtag words of encouragement. Question 4. And question 5.
It's kind of irrelevant. I can see your time. It's just like, you know how there's the Kit Kat. There's some of the where one of the characters couldn't remember Kit Kat bars. He's trying all these things.
All right, here you go. Let's check. Let's be a highlighter. It's cray cray. All right, guys, I want to go over these quickly with you so you have more available to you. Behavior related to defending. That is a key word right there, is where it says defending an area for the purposes of feeding, mating, and caring for young. But if this is the word you want to pay attention to, defending, so that's got to be territoriality. Number 2, most of you got this. Chemical substance secreted into the environment by one organism may influence the behavior of another. That is called a pheromone. Number 3, ooh, this one was tricky. Social interaction that benefits others but has the potential to decrease the lifetime reproductive success of the member exhibiting the behavior. I'm decreasing my reproductive success for you. That is the definition of altruism, not imprinting or communication or any of those others that you chose. I can't even address them all. A signal by a sender that may influence the behavior of a receiver, that's just in general, that's communication. Number 5, what type of communication is the bee dance? It is tactile. Remember, they feel the dancer, they don't watch the dancer, it's dark in the hive. So that's an example of tactile. Okay, they do not watch the dance, they feel the dancer. All right, we can try a few more if I can find some here for you. Here you go. When are we taking this quiz? When? At the end of the class. Yeah. So you're going to collect your data. So if you collect your data and you get it all done, collecting your data, then you can start studying. Okay? All right. No, not tutoring. You're not tutoring a dog. That's operant conditioning. So, guys, if I say doggy, roll over, okay, and then give him a treat, he does something, then the treat comes. So that's a reward. If he does something naughty and I throw him outside as punishment, then that's a punisher. It's coming after whatever that behavior is. Okay, so make sure you don't get those mixed up. Okay, let's see if we have another one. What were the 2 ways we watched a video to decrease stress in your life? Exercise, and maybe you should do that today. Okay, and that was the endocrine system. All right? Okay, now, Don't forget to get your roly-polies here. Did you see my little video I posted yesterday? No. You have to join my Instagram.
I did.
You need to make sure you have enough for your lab yesterday. If you are a team that contributed none, then you'll have to wait till other people are done with them, right? If we don't have enough. I'm going to go with whoever contributed roly-polies first. So as a team, make sure you get, I spent 10 minutes and I found 5. If everybody in your team spent 10 minutes and got 5, you would have how many? 20. Which would be perfect, right? So find those roly-polies. You could find them here on campus. I literally walked around and started flipping over rocks. I'd say the thing I found the most, ants and earwigs. But then earwigs with little pinchies on the end. Yeah. But go next to well-watered areas. If it's a super dry rock, you're probably not going to find them. So that's why I say next to grass or lawn, and just start flipping over rocks, and you will see them. And I just literally took from Natural Cafe the container that held the chicken for my ranch salad that I really liked, and I just put it inside like that. Okay? Would anybody like to have this treasure? Who's closest? Okay? So go and find your roly-polies and be ready to go for your quiz tomorrow. I believe in you. Make good choices. Don't stay up too late.